Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle D'Souza Gill, and I am delighted to be guest hosting Dinesh's podcast today. He will be back for the next episode, so make sure you tune in next time as well. But today, we have a lot to talk about. We're going to be talking about Biden's address to the nation. We're also going to speak to Rod Blagojevich. He's a former Democrat governor, but he's going to tell us all about the inside scoop of how the Democrats operate, all about their Chicago party boss politics. And so make sure you stay with us. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
Since Joe Biden's speech on Wednesday, comparisons between the Democrat Party in 1968 and the party in 2024 have become increasingly clear. There are some important similarities. Both the convention in 68 and that of 24 will be held in Chicago. The Democrats love Chicago. The Democrats in both 68 and 24 are dealing with a third-party candidate who has left the Democrat Party to run as an independent with the American Independent Party. In 1968, it was George Wallace, the leader of the Southern Democrats, who ran on an anti-desegregation platform. While in 2024, it is Robert Kennedy Jr., who's the former Democrat running as the AIP candidate. Kennedy is opposed to Biden's policy of prolonging the war in Ukraine, and he has criticized the chaos caused by Biden's mulish insistence that Americans must accept unchecked illegal immigration, no matter how damaging it is to our communities. Our southern border, according to Kennedy, is a, quote, dystopian nightmare created by the open border policies of the federal government. Like Biden, President Lyndon B. Johnson gave a speech on television to explain why he was not seeking re-election. Quote, "There is division in the American House now," President Lyndon Johnson lamented on March 31st, 1968, as he shocked the nation by refusing the Democratic nomination. Americans at the time were sharply divided by their attitudes toward the Vietnam War, and there was widespread dissatisfaction over LBJ's failure to be forthcoming about January's Tet Offensive. In the winter of 1968, LBJ had assured the nation that American forces were close to winning the war, but the North Vietnamese surprise attacks during Tet, or the Vietnamese New Year celebration, revealed that the war was not almost over, and the United States was not just around the corner from achieving victory. Although the Tet Offensive was a military defeat for the Communists, as they failed to keep the territory they captured and casualties were high, the attack revealed the true extent of America's involvement and revealed the horror of war as gruesome images of death and destruction were broadcast nightly. People across the country felt betrayed by a government that had misled them. Historian Arthur Schlesinger famously offered the Democrats a more charitable description of their war effort. He likened Kennedy's decision to go to war in Vietnam to that of a man who haplessly steps into a boggy quagmire. In his 1967 book, The Bitter Harvest, Schlesinger wrote, "The first step into a quagmire inexorably draws one down a slippery slope. A quagmire is a force of nature, something we humans cannot control and must struggle to escape through no fault of our own." Schlesinger argued that the Kennedy and Johnson administrations, quote, stumbled blindly into war with Vietnam without realizing what they were getting into. In recognition of the growing lack of support for the war, during his 40-minute speech, Johnson also announced that he was curtailing the bombing of the North Vietnamese and pivoting to a scaled-back war policy in terms of both money and manpower. Johnson made good on this promise, and the Tet Offensive marked the beginning of the end for America's involvement in the war. On Wednesday, Joe Biden addressed the nation for just 11 minutes in order to, like LBJ, explain his decision to leave the presidential race. Rather than acknowledging Americans' current dissatisfaction, as LBJ did in both word and deed, The Biden administration made no such concessions, despite Americans' discontent with immigration, inflation, rising crime, the war in Ukraine, as well as Democrats' polarizing rhetoric. Though Joe Biden did not follow the example of LBJ by offering conciliatory comments to the American public, he acknowledged the nation's divided state. He also embraced the notion that once again, Democrats have unwittingly wandered into a quagmire. "We are so divided," as Biden said in an interview, "because forces we cannot control want to stop the progress the Democrats are offering," Biden informs us. Biden began his speech by talking about unity and perfection. He said that being president is a sacred task that consists of perfecting our union. He did concede that being president is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. We can never forget that, and I never have. Where in our founding documents does it say that the president's job is to perfect us? By perfect, Biden means we are meant to reject those who disagree with him. He urges voters to save our union by purging dissenters, by making the election a virtue litmus test. He said, "I've made it clear that I believe America is at an inflection point, one of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine the fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. America is going to have to choose between moving forward or backward, between hope and hate, between unity and division." Biden's words imply that it is not our freedom to choose that must be protected, but our choice of the Democratic Party that is crucial to the preservation of our union. In order to be united, we must crush the opposition and cut off anyone who disagrees with our project of perfecting the citizenry. If we just get rid of all the people who disagree with us, we'll be united, right? We must therefore choose Democrats if we are to be a people of unity. If we do not choose his party in the coming election, Biden warns us, we will be the people of division. To unite, we have to divide. Biden rejects the ideas put forward at the Republican convention, where J.D. Vance said that, quote, "our disagreements actually make us stronger." Vance talked about how in the Senate, our American system is alive and well, where sometimes he persuades his colleagues and sometimes they persuade him. In his acceptance speech, Vance asked the nation to embrace the American experiment. He said, "My message to my fellow Americans, those watching from across the country, is shouldn't we be governed by a party that is unafraid to debate ideas and come to the best solution? That ability to disagree and debate in order to find the best path forward, in order to search for the truth, is the hallmark of American political life." But not so for Joe Biden. In his speech, he first stated that, quote, "we have to decide if we still believe in honesty, decency and respect, freedom, justice, and democracy. We do this by seeing those we disagree with as friends, fellow Americans," Biden told us. How we make our fellow Americans our friends, though, is not by trying to persuade, according to Joe Biden. Biden explains that we make friends by advancing our political causes. Those of us who cherish that cause cherish it so much, the cause of American democracy itself. We must unite to protect it. We bully those who disagree with us until they agree to be friends, he declared. Biden continued, "It's become clear to me that I needed to unite my party in this critical endeavor." He is uniting the nation, which is divided along party lines, by uniting just his party, the Democrat Party. Biden states that by passing the torch to a new generation of Democrats, he is offering the best way to unite our nation. That makes no sense. A divided country by gearing up to win a fight? By decimating the other side? Biden ends his call for national unity by encouraging the Democrats to, quote, "act together to preserve our democracy." How is democracy preserved when the leaders refuse to acknowledge the dissatisfaction of half the voters? Biden's view of unity is nonsensical, but perhaps that is the point. If a speaker refuses to persuade through logic, but rather chooses to impose his will through power, he achieves a goal, but at the cost of finding the truth. There's a lack of humility in this way of thinking because it assumes that you already know what is right and you have nothing to learn from those who disagree with you. Telling people to unite by becoming more divisive is a kind of doublethink because it insists that we concede as truth that which our reason tells us cannot be true. Winston Smith, the protagonist of the dystopian novel 1984, explains that doublethink is the act of simultaneously accepting two contradictory beliefs as correct. It is a sign of obedience and an acknowledgement of powerlessness to abandon reason and believe that which the law of non-contradiction tells us cannot be true. In the novel, Winston explains that doublethink is, quote, to know and not know, to be conscious of complete truthfulness while telling carefully constructed lies, to hold simultaneously two opinions which canceled out knowing them to be contradictory and believing in both of them, to use logic against logic, to repudiate morality while laying claim to it, to believe that democracy was impossible and that the party was the guardian of democracy, to forget whatever it was necessary to forget, then to draw it back into memory again at the moment when it was needed, and then promptly to forget it again, and above all, to apply the same process to the process itself. That was the ultimate subtlety, consciously to induce unconsciousness, and then once again to become unconscious of the active hypnosis you had just performed. Even to understand the word doublethink involved the use of doublethink. By offering the nation a healthy dose of doublethink in his invitation to unite by dividing, by telling Democrats to become more entrenched in their views, to be less open to listening to the other side, Joe Biden threatens to turn the Democrats into the party of Oceania, the all-controlling political party that rules every aspect of life in 1984. I hope Democrats reject Joe Biden's call to dystopia, that they do not view their opponents as, quote, going backwards. I hope Democrats stop claiming that when Republicans exercise their right to vote, that they are destroying, quote, democracy. If Americans come together and reject the doublespeak, we can look forward to lively and interesting political debates between Democrats and Republicans who can, at the end of the day, know that we have a democracy. If we continue to vote, if we make sure that we are not demonizing the other side as if it's the end of democracy, as long as our freedom to choose our candidates and politicians is intact, nothing could be more undemocratic than them choosing for their nominee someone who was not voted for by their delegates, Kamala Harris. The Democrats are the ones who are currently not following the practices that they're preaching. They say they're all about democracy, but in reality, not so much. They're actually controlled by big party bosses. We're going to learn more about this when we talk to our guest today, Rod Blagojevich.
These are very turbulent times. I want you to start thinking about gold. Let me talk about oil. Sales of oil have historically been predominantly in US dollars. Recently, oil producers like Saudi Arabia have been exploring options for sales in other currencies. Oil sales in other currencies would lessen the demand for the US dollar. And so I ask you, if there's less demand for the US dollar, what happens to the US dollar? Not good. Look, it's reasons like this that I buy gold from Birch Gold, why I feel they are a valuable resource to you as well. For over 20 years, Birch Gold Group has helped tens of thousands of Americans protect their savings by converting an IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. To learn more, text Dinesh to 989898. Claim your free information kit on gold. There's no obligation, only information. Birch Gold has earned my trust with their education-first approach. There are thousands of happy customers. There are countless 5-star reviews. So protect your savings with gold before the dollar plunges any further. Text Dinesh to 989898 today. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the increasing cost of health insurance? Have you had enough of not having control over your healthcare dollars? Introducing ShareRight. Share, R-I-G-H-T. Healthcare done the right way. At ShareRight, you're not just a number, you're part of a caring community. Forget about paying excessive premiums. With ShareRight, you stand to save 30 to 50% compared to health insurance. So think about what you could do with all those savings. But it's more than just savings. ShareRight ensures you have access to the the care you deserve precisely when you need it, from routine checkups to unexpected emergencies. With ShareRight, your healthcare is their priority. So empower yourself today by taking control of your healthcare costs. Visit joinshareright.org/Dinesh to learn more. See how much you can save. Joinshareright.org/Dinesh. That's where you go. Again, it's joinshareright.org/Dinesh for healthcare done the right way.
I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast Rod Blagojevich. He is a former governor, author, podcast host. Rod, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Danielle. How are you?
I'm doing great. I saw some of your pictures. You went to the RNC. What was that like?
It was very different from the other conventions I've been to because that was my fifth, and the previous four were Democratic conventions. The first one was back in 1996, which happened to be in Chicago, and I was given a speaking role at that first one. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. There were like 3 people in the audience. 2 of them were guys who were sweeping up the floors, and I was given 2 minutes, and I spoke, and I think at least one of those guys that was sweeping seemed to like it because I remember him clapping. This one was very different because, it's a different party, but what I really liked about it was the energy, the enthusiasm, and also the Republican Party today looks a lot more like the Democrat Party did back in 1996. And there was a lot of diversity among the delegates, a lot of diversity among the people who were attending. And it's a new Republican Party, and it's a Republican Party led by Donald Trump that's focused on helping working people, which is what the Democratic Party used to always be about, but is no longer about because they're caught up with a lot of their left-wing socialist political correctness kind of politics. So I had a great time there. It was different, but very interesting. And I had a good seat to see President Trump's speech, which I thought was fantastic.
Wow, that's amazing. And so as someone who's been to so many DNCs before this period, what do you feel like changed in the DNCs over the years? Because it seems like even not that long ago, they had a much, or at least would kind of try to appeal to a lot of kind of mainstream, you mentioned working class Americans. And it seems like that's not even really a focus anymore. I see obviously a lot of the pandering and so on, but it seems like they would at least make somewhat of an attempt, but it almost seems like they're hostile, especially to white working class Americans. Those people are kind of not really welcome as Democrats at all. And so when do you feel like you saw kind of the DNC itself change? Because I feel like the RNC or the DNC, those are kind of the party's chances to, spotlight certain voices, maybe reach out to new people. And so when did you kind of see that change?
Well, it didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, little by little. The sort of extreme left-wing, lunatic fringe, socialist wing of the party has increasingly gained strength and influence. And so much of that, ironically, has pushed out ordinary, everyday working people who believe in hard work, but also believe they'd like to have a chance at opportunity to get ahead and do better in life than what they're doing now. And the irony is that the socialists claim that they're on the side of working people, but their idea of helping working people is pretty much to not improve their condition and move them up. It's about pulling other people down and keeping everybody in an equal place of, you can argue historically, of misery, because there hasn't been a socialist government or country that has ever succeeded. It's only ruined things. And I think this is what's happened to the Democrat Party. And it's a party that's so focused on, superficial things like the color of somebody's skin or somebody's gender or someone's sexual orientation. And I'm not saying those things aren't relevant, but I am saying it's very different from the dream that Martin Luther King put forth back on the 28th of December, 1963, about 90 years before you were born, Danielle, when he said, his dream was that we would be a country that judged people not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Our party, the Democratic Party, has lost its way. It's devoid of common sense. It's actually murdered common sense on so many things. Character is not at all important. Identity is. And I think working people, whether they're white, Latino, Black, Asian, whatever they may be, they're not interested in that. They're interested in just doing well, working hard, having a chance, an opportunity in life to build a better life for their families. And I think this is among the reasons why the new Trump Republican Party is so appealing to working people. And I would say this, Danielle, the Democrat Party has always claimed to be on the side of Black people, and to a large extent, I should say to some extent, there's certainly been true in the civil rights movement and all the progress that's been made in tearing down the barriers that kept Black people in a place of inferiority in our society. But now the Democrat Party is really practical in its coalition politics, and they're really not interested in lifting low-income, poor people who disproportionately are Black, lifting them up. They just want to keep them where they are, provide some sort of government assistance, make them dependent on government, and therefore it's a form of buying votes. And the fear for the Democrats is if they can't get 90 to 95% of the Black vote, they can't win elections. And so it's a very cynical kind of politics. The first Black mayor of Chicago, Harold Washington, called it plantation politics. He called it this way back in the early 1980s. And it's, I think, never been more profound, I should pronounce, than it is today. So it isn't just white working people, it's all working people. And, I think the beauty of America, and, your mom and dad, your dad's from India, your mom, Mexican descent, Latina. Am I right, Danielle? Yes. You're the new America. But where do they come from? They're immigrants who came legally to seek a new life and chase their dreams in a country that offers opportunity and a chance to get the American dream. You see, the Democrat Party used to believe in the American dream, but they don't anymore. And so there's so many things that are wrong with today's Democratic Party. I can go on, but I'll wait for you to ask me another question, and then.
No, this is all fascinating. There's so much to draw on there. Well, before we get into, Chicago and all of that, I wanted to pick up on something else you were saying about the kind of the Democrats who used to be for working class. But when you look at it with the kind of different sides of the Democrat Party, it's almost like there's the side that is like the big tech people, the Hollywood people, the ruling elites of the Democrat side. And then there are the people who are maybe, like you were saying, they're on the plantation. They're being used. They just kind of want them for their votes, and they don't really do a lot for them. So how do you think the Democrats find themselves in the sense that they're not really offering an American dream for a lot of those people, but they need their votes? So what do? They kind of offer more government benefits. What is kind of the place there? And I bring this up because I recently saw that the guy, I think, who founded LinkedIn donated $7 million to Kamala Harris, and he wants the policies under her future administration, if she were to win, to be more pro like Microsoft business because he's on their board. But then others like Bernie Sanders are like, no, because he wants them broken up. And so I feel like even within the Democrat Party, they have to kind of like wrestle these two sides of the Democrat Party because they want to raise a lot of money, but then they also are socialists. So how does that work?
No, that's a great question. And that's one of the great contradictions of the paradox of today's Democratic Party. It is that a coalition of Silicon Valley billionaires, Wall Street financiers, big corporations, and Hollywood movie stars. They're the donor base of the party, and they're the ones who have the ability to be able to express their views and get them heard far and wide. But the everyday working person doesn't have that. And so the Democrats have prioritized that first group at the expense of the working people. And the best illustration that I can give you in recent history is what just happened with Biden. Once George Clooney called and said that Biden should get out of the race, Obama heard him, and then he did what he did behind the scenes, and they forced Biden off the ticket, even though he got 80% of the Democratic primary vote and more than 14.5 million everyday ordinary Democratic voters, working people, voted for him. So they basically ignored the will of the people and did what they did just recently, and that shows you where their priorities are. When their donor base and movie stars call, they put the interest of those people above the working guy, the little guy. And this is the problem with the party. Yet they dress it up because this strange coalition of Silicon Valley, Wall Street financiers, corporate America, and Hollywood, they dress it up and they embrace, politically anyway, the socialist politicians of the Democrat Party, whose answer to inequality isn't to lift people up, but to pull other people down. And the Democrat Party has historically always been successful when it's built coalitions. They've never really been a party that's kind of gather together behind a unified principle. It's been more about practical politics. This I know very well because I was a twice elected Democrat governor and frankly never lost an election. But now they're faced with these contradictions. And the one thing that kept the Democrats, I think, unified behind a common purpose was the fact that say what you will about the ideas and the policies and maybe some of the philosophy that wasn't exactly clear thinking. They had a common purpose behind looking after the little guy, the everyday American, the forgotten American. But they have forgotten the forgotten American. And the forgotten American knows that, and they're frustrated and they're angry. And so the way the Democrats run elections these days is they, no pun intended, they trump up fake criminal charges. They weaponize the Department of Justice, which is disgraceful, use it as a political weapon to destroy the leading candidate of the opposition party, President Trump, so that they can run a race to say that he's a felon. They're not offering the people anything. They're simply saying they're not Trump. So their whole campaign is about demonizing Trump, not about doing anything to help people. And so it's a very cynical politics. It's a very dangerous politics. And I would argue it's worse. It's worse than an unpatriotic politics, because when you start messing around with something as vital as the rule of law in a free society, and your father's an expert at this, when you do this, you're undermining freedom. And if there isn't a check on power that comes from law, then it's really a question of the elites controlling everything. And that's what today's Democratic Party is about. It's the elites against the people. And what they just did to Biden, led by Obama and Pelosi, and their donor base, what they just did to Biden was an example of selection masquerading as election. They're pretending like he's got, the Democrat voters behind him, yet he was muscled out by the political bosses of the Democrat Party.
Right. I want to read this tweet you wrote because I thought it was really good. You wrote, "I've known Obama since 1995. We both come out of Chicago politics. I know how it works. He's behind the campaign to dump 15 million Dem primary voters and replace Biden with his choice. Classic Chicago Democrat machine politics. Selection over election. The bosses over the people." So is this classic Democrat politics? I mean, I guess I feel like on the Republican side, it's not normal to have, the big party bosses. In some ways, I feel like the Republican side, we need to be more organized and we have to be more united. And so it's actually a challenge for us a lot of the time to get everybody doing the, as you said, the practical politics maybe of how to get everything done. But the Democrats, it seems like, kind of like you said, they clearly all voted for Biden, all the delegates were for Biden, and then they basically shoved him out. But what do you think happened? Do you think that this is Obama? What is kind of your read on it?
Well, their big lie was exposed, and their big lie was to pretend that Biden was fit as a fiddle, filled with vim, vigor, and vitality when he wasn't, when it was obvious to anybody who saw him, not just in the last month, but for the last 4 years, that he wasn't at the top of his game. In fact, it's among the reasons why clearly when he ran in 2020, they used COVID as an excuse, but they basically hid him in the basement. They hid him in the basement because he had been at that time experiencing the medical situation that he's now been forced to acknowledge and leave the race for. So they've been lying to us all of that time. And that's another bad thing, terrible thing, sinister thing that they've done. And the idea that and I'm sounding like Biden, he likes to say that phrase, the idea, I got to get that out of my vocabulary. The thought that they would lie to us that way with the most important person in the world, not just the United States, the man or the woman who has the ability to push a button and destroy the whole world. The idea that they would play with that and lie to us that way is disgraceful, and another example of how they put politics over everything, nothing sacred. With regard to Obama and his role and Pelosi and her role, I have no doubt in my mind that they did what they did from the shadows of the back room, that they orchestrated the campaign that happened immediately after the debate with President Trump, but they were already in the process of doing it because this doesn't happen overnight. It was done in stages. They recognized that it was very possible that Biden's infirmity was becoming more and more obvious to voters. So they had to figure out a way to get him out of the race. My theory is that they were the ones who encouraged him to challenge Trump at that early debate, knowing that Biden, cognitively impaired as he is, would be dumb enough to agree to do it. And secondly, that from their point of view, the bosses, that he would expose himself as being cognitively impaired. So that's what I believe happened. And
Wow.
once he did that, then Obama and Pelosi got to work in their plush back rooms because they're both very rich people. They're different from the old school Chicago bosses who used to smoke big cigars and they had pinky rings. The two of them, Pelosi, don't look anything like that. They're very, they're impressive.
They're in Martha's Vineyard. They're in Napa Valley
That's right. And
deciding these things.
that's right. That's where the back rooms are now. They're big and palatial and splendid places, but it's the same politics. And so they were able to do what they did and get Biden to leave. I thought he'd have the wherewithal and the fortitude to withstand that, but he didn't. And now they're pushing their new candidate. And again, this is what the bosses in Chicago have done for a long, long time, and in other big cities in American politics, is they're the ones who pull the strings. They put the candidates up front, and then when their candidate wins, they're the ones who call the shots. And there's no doubt in my mind that if, God forbid, Kamala Harris is the next president, she's not going to be calling the shots. Maybe that's actually good, but she's going to be controlled by those forces behind her who were instrumental in making her the nominee now.
You might have heard Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way they used to. They've been part of this terrible cancel culture, and so they want to pass the savings directly on to you by having a $25 extravaganza. Now, when Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company, just pillows, but with the help of his dedicated employees, Mike now has hundreds of products, some of which you may not even know about. So to get the word out, I want to invite my viewers and listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows, $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. 6-pack towel sets, $25. Brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, $25. And for the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. Orders over $75, by the way, get free shipping as well. The amazing offer won't last long, so take advantage of it. Call 800-876-0227. The number again, 800-876-0227, or go to mypillow.com to get the discounts, to get the free shipping. You got to use the promo code. It's DINESH, Dinesh. Hey guys, in a crazy year with a big election coming up, I'd like to invite you to join my Locals channel and become an annual subscriber. You'll be glad you did. I post a lot of exclusive content there, including content that's censored on other social media platforms. On Locals, you get Dinesh Unchained, Dinesh Uncensored. You can also comment on my posts and interact with me directly. And I do a live weekly Q&A every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic is off limits. I've also uploaded some cool films to Locals, documentaries, feature films, my films, but also films by others. 2,000 Mules is up there. And my latest film, Police State, with a new film coming out, a big one, this September, this fall. If you're an annual subscriber, you can stream and watch this movie content for free. It's included with your subscription. So check out the channel. It's dinesh.locals.com. I'd love to have you along for this great ride. Again, it's dinesh.locals.com.
If you look at this kind of situation of how do they actually force Biden to not run again, because Biden right now is president. So let's say you're Nancy Pelosi, Obama. How do you think they go about this? Let's say, like you said, they get him to do the debate. He embarrasses himself. Everybody's, shocked by how bad it was and calling for him to not run again. But let's say, let's say he kept doing what he was doing those first few weeks, where he just said, I'm in this race, I'm going to keep going. Eventually, I guess if he just kept saying that, the Democrats would have to fall in line and just back him. And I think that's what he was hoping. So do you think that they threatened him? I mean, my theory is I think maybe Nancy Pelosi, I at least read that she said this is going to be either done the easy way or the hard way. And maybe she threatened him over his legacy, saying, hey, if you say you're not running now, we'll say you're a hero, we'll say you're a great president, all this stuff. And if you're the reason we lose to Trump, we're basically your legacy is gonna be that you ruined everything for us or something. So I don't know if that was the push, but I don't know. So how does it usually work with the party bosses? Let's say it's Nancy Pelosi and Obama. At least those are the two that I've heard have a lot of power, but maybe you know more.
Well, that would be their explanation to the public, and that's a benign explanation. And if that was all that it was, then there's something to be said for that. But that's not what it was. This was old school, brass knuckles, back room, nasty politics where, like, in prison, you get a guy who gets a shiv and he stabs somebody else in the back. This is what happened to Biden. And it's right out of the Godfather movie. They made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Okay. And the way they did it was a combination of the carrot and the stick, but it was stick first, carrot next. In other words, Biden has been in Washington since 1973. He was first elected to the Senate at the age of 30, barely 30, in 1972. So he'd been there all that time. So he doesn't just have a skeleton in a closet or a few skeletons in a closet. He has a lot of skeletons in a lot of closets. And Obama and Pelosi know them because Pelosi's been there almost as long as Biden. But more than that, Obama chose Biden to be his running mate. And in order to be able to be comfortable with the candidate that you're asking to run with you, there's an extensive vetting process that takes place by the presidential candidate and his people. So they did background checks and all kinds of research on Biden to know exactly what issues are out there that could be discovered that could create a political problem and maybe even cause Obama to not win. So Obama has all that research. He's got all those skeletons, and there must be a lot of them, and there must be some really nasty ones, and I suspect there are. And I believe it was that. I think it was that when it was clear that that Biden had to go and Biden was resisting, then they pretty much came to him with the stuff that they had, and they basically said, look, we're going to use our friends in the media. We're going to drop these dimes on you, and you're going to have all kinds of political problems. The other party is going to take advantage of that. They may even want to impeach you over this. You're going to have this kind of political firestorm. You could never win re-election. So what would be, you do this, Joe, this is the hard way. That's what's going to happen to you. And by the way, all these donors who had been giving money to your campaign, they're on hold. They're not going to give you any money now. On the other hand, if you leave, then they offer them something good and, beneficial. Perhaps, contractors or others will raise money for his presidential library. Hunter Biden getting a pardon at some point, whether Biden himself does that or Kamala Harris made a promise to do it. I think that had to be on the table. It's not good what Hunter Biden's been convicted of. On the other hand, you're a father. How do you not protect your son or your child? So I think that has to be part of the thinking. But I thought that Biden was going to be stronger and tougher. And if he simply weathered the storm with all of their threats, at some point they had to stop. And eventually those fundraisers, those donors who were pulling away would have come back because it would have been their crusade against Trump. So he just didn't have the fortitude to withstand the storm. And as a result, he's limping out of office this way. He gave in to the pressure. And it's another example. He's a bad leader because if you let that pressure get to you, then in my opinion, you shouldn't be the president of the United States.
No. And I guess the other question is, did Biden make the choice? Did he, as you say, was he on the other end of the deal, or was the negotiating with Jill Biden? Because does Biden know enough about these things going on? I mean, I guess, of course, there was the conspiracy that he didn't even write the post, and then he was disappeared for days before he resurfaced and gave his speech. Do you think in his speech, it seemed like he didn't even say why he was resigning? Do you think that it's because he thinks the American people just kind of forget about it? I mean, it seems kind of strange that they wouldn't say anything when he was so resolute on running again, and then all of a sudden says he isn't, but doesn't say why.
No, he read the speech. It's a speech that was written by, some of his aides, perhaps even with talking points that came directly from Obama or Pelosi. I don't have evidence of that, but that's certainly not impossible. Again, I know the business. I know how it works. I know what happens in the back rooms and some of the discussion that's done, and then things are announced publicly. It was a sanitized statement. Whether he, is cognitive enough to understand what he was saying or made the decision, my guess is he probably is. But you got to remember, and you're so young, but Joe Biden's been lying to the American people pretty much since he's been a senator. And he was forced to get out of the presidential race when he was a young man in 1988 because he caught plagiarizing a speech by a labor leader in England, a guy from Wales. His name was Neil Kinnock. It was a beautiful speech Kinnock gave sometime before Biden then took it and gave it himself. And it was such a firestorm back then when the media had more integrity that Biden, he stepped out of the race. And so he showed a sign of him that he's willing with pressure to get out. And there's been other examples of when he's acted that way, including 2015, 2016, when he wanted to run for president and Obama told him, you can't, Hillary's going to run and she'll beat you. And then Biden decided to step aside as well. He's the opposite of Trump in the sense that Trump is strong and tough, and when that heat comes his way, he gets stronger. And I got to tell you, Danielle, I feel like I'm that way, and I feel that's why I did 8 years in prison for politics, not for crimes I wouldn't give in. But I think that's the only thing you can do when you really know that you're right on something that's really important. But Biden is a political creature. He's been a political animal, and he's been a member of the Democrat Party in a high place for a long, long time. The world he knows is Washington, that Washington establishment. The world he represents is Washington, that Washington establishment, with all that political industrial complex, with the senators and the congressmen, the staffers who are a permanent bureaucracy there, with the bureaucracy and the donor class. These are the people this guy has been speaking to for decades. He's forgotten the people back home in his tiny little state of Delaware. He says the right things, but there's nothing behind it. And so I think the way he got out of the race really is going to define his legacy in the future when some honest biographer honestly looks at his record. And incidentally, I read your dad's biography on Ronald Reagan when I was in prison. It was fantastic. But if he looks at his record, I think they're going to say that this ending of Biden's career is really his legacy. It's been what he's been all along, a political animal, part of the Democratic establishment and part of the Washington establishment.
Yeah, and you mentioned this, the back rooms many times. Do you think that Obama and Pelosi generally fall on the same side when it comes to the backroom Democrat politics? And is that also Hillary Clinton? I guess I'm just so curious about the Democrat apparatus of power, because I think sometimes as Republicans, we just think, oh, George Soros or something, and there's this like imaginary person who pulls all the strings. But is it kind of like a coalition of these people? How does it generally work with like a party boss and kind of the backroom politics that you're saying?
No, I think that's right. I think there's different coalitions of the elites. Even within the elites, the ruling class of the Democrat Party, there's different factions. And in this particular case, they all came together to push Biden out. And in that respect, I believe the Clintons, Hillary and Bill Clinton, working hand in glove with Obama and with Pelosi and with current Democrat House Leader Jeffries, with Chuck Schumer in the Senate Majority Leader. I think they all came together on this one and were unified to get Biden to leave. And I think once Biden saw that they were all joining together, he realized as a practical standpoint that there was consensus among the bosses and he better step out. But those are the bosses of the party. And the bosses of the party also reflect their big donor base because they have to please those people because of the campaign contributions. Now, both parties do that, but there is a difference between the actual the magnitude of and the proportionality of one side versus the others. The Democrats are a lot more apt to drop what they're doing and listen to their big donors. Trump has changed the politics of the Republican Party because he has such support among the grassroots. His populist message resonates that he can afford to make enemies of the big money people. That was one of the things that I felt was important when I was governor, that I would raise so much money from a lot of different people and places so I can be strong politically, so I can govern and push my agenda through. Because if you're weak politically, you can't govern and you do nothing for the people. But if you want to really push things that you thought are important for the people, you have to be strong politically. And you have to be in a place where you can afford to, frankly, lose friends and make a hard decision, but it affects the special interest that has another view. And I think in this particular case, all of those different special interests got together because of their great fear that Trump will be the next president.
Yeah, and he's doing so well.
Yes, and they fear Trump not because he's just a Republican. They could live with establishment Republicans like Romney and McCain and Cheney and Bush and those people. They fear Trump because Trump's a very different kind of political leader who recognizes the need to reform Washington and change it, because it truly is the establishment against the people. It's the elites against us. And they think the people work for them, not the other way around. And so that's why there's so much at stake in this election. It's why they're so determined to destroy Trump. It's why they're changing our politics. This was, Lincoln so eloquently said at his Gettysburg Address, government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
You ever read that in your school books, Danielle? You might remember that, of course.
Yep.
When you're the governor of Illinois, you make it your business to know everything you can about Lincoln.
You're like, I'm going to quote every book behind me that I know.
They replaced that. See, they replaced that with the new politics of prosecution, persecution, and personal destruction. That's how the Democrats are operating now. And that's what's so disgraceful because, again, politics is rough and tumble. And, I'm not saying that I was an angel or a choir boy in it. I was, successful. So clearly I was in the mix. But there's some things you just don't do. You just don't touch or screw around with the rule of law, because that's at the heart of our freedoms in our country. The right of the people to self-government, to elect their leaders in elections free and fair. And it's all based upon whether we can trust the law. And if you can't trust the law, and I've learned that you cannot, that it can be abused by people in power and misused and weaponized. If you can't trust the law, nobody is safe. And if they can do this to governors like they did to me and presidents like they're doing to Trump, like your dad, and think about the things they can do and are doing to everyday people who don't have the ability to fight back.
Yeah, no, it's really sickening. And the fact that they're willing to go to that level just to beat up their political opponents is just awful. I mean, even after the assassination attempt, the fact that they're trying to, question the authenticity of it or make it seem like, we're just going to blow past it. I mean, that was a serious event that took place. But before we sign off, wanted to ask you a little bit about Kamala Harris. What is your read on her? How does she fit in to the party bosses? Do you think that Obama, those people always liked her? Or do you think they kind of felt like, we really don't want Kamala? Because in some ways, I feel like Kamala was kind of Biden's insurance policy in the sense that for a while, maybe they were covering for his dementia because they were like, well, we don't want to get Kamala. Kamala's polling is low. She's not so great. She didn't make it so far in the Democrat primaries. She's never really been as good as I think they hoped as vice president. She always kind of had pretty bad appeal. Border czar wasn't so good. But even with black voters, it seems like she wasn't really galvanizing the base much. So, but anyways, it seems like they're kind of stuck with Kamala because Biden endorsed Kamala. A lot of these other party bosses, they've endorsed Kamala as well. So do you think it's because they just feel like they're stuck with her, or they actually felt like she was part of their orbit?
No, I think they were caught in a catch-22 between a rock and a hard place. And it's the lesser of two evils. And cognitively impaired, feeble Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, who's, young and in her prime, that was their choice. And I know that they would have wished that they had someone else they could have fallen back on, because her politics is extreme liberal. I mean, what you basically have with the Democratic nominee now is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's the same views, the same politics. I mean, she's take away fracking from, working people in Western Pennsylvania. She's talked about supporting things like defunding the police. We have to reimagine the police. That's a phrase that they used. It was a euphemism for defunding the police. I can go on and on about her extreme left-wing record. I think the biggest vulnerability she has from a political point of view is she truly was the czar of the border. And Biden made her that. And they're lying now to say that that's not what he called her, but there's all kinds of evidence, including film of him saying it and her being acknowledged as that. And she was a disaster. I mean, she was looking the other way, and 10 or 20 million illegal immigrants stormed into our country. And a lot of them are criminals. I know this from firsthand experience, considering the 8 years I spent in an unhappy place. So I think she's got that real problem. And once her record gets exposed, hopefully in a way where most Americans can get access to it, because you can't trust the media because they're so dishonest and they're so much a part of the Democrat Party now. I think once that gets exposed, I think the dynamic will change dramatically. So I don't know that do I think she's a boss created type of a candidate? The answer is yes. If you look at her background in California, she was made by Willie Brown, the legendary Speaker of the California General Assembly and the House, who I knew, by the way, Willie Brown, a very, compelling figure, colorful guy, real clever and shrewd and successful politically. He made her, and so she's and I'm not saying you can't be made by the bosses and still be good. I actually have a boss in my family. My wife's father's a little boss here in Chicago, or was. And Lincoln was practical in his politics and had to deal with some of the leaders in his party in all the different ways. But her record is her record, and it's a hard left, extreme, ultra liberal, socialist type record. And I don't think most Americans want that for our country. The bottom line is, I think most Americans still believe there's something unique about this great country of ours. It's why your dad came here. It's why your grandparents on your mother's side came here. It's why my father came here and my mother's parents came here. Chance to build a better life for your family. It's freedom and opportunity. And in both places, today's Democrats are anti-freedom and anti-opportunity. I mean, that's the heart of it. And if this race is about that, you're a guy and you're a working guy, or you're a working mother by yourself, you want a better life for your children. You want a chance to get ahead. You don't want to be stuck where you are and have other people come down by you. You want a chance to go up where other people are. In other words, join the middle class, upper class, or even get rich someday. That's the beauty of America.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, this is my final question, I promise, because I just think that you're fascinating and I like hearing all the inside Democrat scoop. So, Kamala Harris is VP. Do you think, because part of me feels like, you know what, Trump is still polling ahead of Kamala. I think Trump's going to win. Do Democrats think that? Do people want to be her VP? Or do you think if you're Newsom or someone else, not that he's going to be chosen because he's from California and Kamala's from California, but if you're someone who wants to be president on the Democrat side, would you rather just wait till the next cycle? Or do you think you want to join Harris? Because some people are like, oh, there's going to be the Veep stakes and all these people to consider for VP. And then I've also heard other people saying, well, she should just pick Josh Shapiro, Pennsylvania, or Kelly from Arizona because swing states. So is it going to be a strategic decision like that? Or is it going to be one of the big Democrat governors? What do you think the people who actually want to be president want to do? And then what do you think the party bosses want?
The party bosses want a strategic decision. Kamala Harris wants a strategic decision. They want to make her ticket as strong as possible so she has the best chance to win. They want to win. So it's going to be all politics and what they think it gives them the best chance to win. Not who'd be the best president, but this will be the litmus test will be who can help us win. And, and I'm not here to say only the Democrats do that. I mean, both political parties, there's a practical element to this business as well. With regard to whether or not you're somebody, let's say a governor somewhere, or a senator, or a congressman, or maybe a business person, and they think the party leaders and Harris believe that person would be a good candidate, in most cases, everybody's going to take it. And if they have presidential aspirations, they'll take it. And even if the ticket hopefully goes down the tubes and loses big, hopefully, you're still elevated your profile if you're the running mate to some extent with the party compared to where you might be if you didn't do it.
Okay.
So I think in almost every case, I think the exception would be if you're such a large figure within your party that being associated with her campaign would actually diminish you. In most cases,
maybe like a Michelle Obama or something.
Yeah, exactly.
You'd be beyond that.
Right. Way back in 1976, there was talk Gerald Ford was to become a Republican president. Your dad knows this, he wrote about it. And Ronald Reagan was the governor of California, but his stature in the party and in America was much larger than most other governors because he was a movie star and he led a conservative movement and he had this base of support. And the Ford people wanted Reagan and Ford himself to be the running mate. But Reagan was too big for that, and that would have diminished him. So if you got somebody like that, in the case of Michelle Obama, that would not be anything she'd be interested in because it would only be a negative. But the other ones, for the most part, absolutely. It's like somebody me, when I was a governor, if somebody, let's say John Kerry said, I'd like you to, in 2004, I'd like you to be the running mate. I'm sure I would have been delighted and would have run with him. And we both lost, but my profile would have been, maybe hurt, maybe not, but it was still elevated me, at least in the short run. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. It seems like
Thank
if
goodness, by
Kamala
the way,
runs
he
for
didn't pick.
this.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, thank goodness he didn't pick me because I'm glad he. Anyway, I shouldn't go into that.
Yeah, no, it seems like if Kamala Harris runs for this and loses, though, I don't know what her future is. But if you're the VP and you run and lose, you may have elevated profile continue. But what happens to someone like Kamala if she loses? She probably can't run for president again, I'm guessing.
Really depends on how she runs. It really depends how the election ends up. If she runs a good campaign and she's runs a close race, she could very well be a viable candidate in 2028. Look, sometimes in politics, when you lose, at the time you lose, it stings. Now, I never had that experience. I wish I did in that second election as governor. I wouldn't end up going where I ended up going. But yeah, I look at history, and if you lose a race in the right sort of way at the right time, and actually you don't know it at the time, but it turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you because it puts you in a position to win the prize that you really want later on. And there are examples of that. Abraham Lincoln in 1858 ran for the Senate against Stephen Douglas, both from Illinois. Lincoln lost. He was heartbroken. But then 2 years later, he runs against Douglas again and wins. And had he won that race in 1858, he wouldn't have been the president in 1860. Now, you can argue, would he lived a longer life? He wouldn't have been assassinated 5 years later. But if your objective is to be the president, that worked for him. Obama in 1998 ran for the Congress. Best thing that ever happened to him was that he lost and got beat soundly by Bobby Rush in the black community. Had Obama won that race, he wouldn't have risked a safe congressional seat to run for the Senate in 2004. He wouldn't have been tapped for the speech he gave in Boston at that convention in 2004. He'd have never been president. I can go on and on. So sometimes when you lose, it's actually good if you lose in the right sort of way. So who knows how things will shake out in 2028. I'm worried and focused about 2024 because everything is at stake in this election, Danielle. This is an important election. These Democrats are the biggest hypocrites in American political history. This election is about saving our democracy from them, from weaponized prosecutors who are destroying the rule of law and being used as political weapons to get the leading candidate of the opposition party. From these people who are lying to the American people consistently, from an establishment that makes the people serve them, not the other way around. There's so much at stake here. So this is really critical that we focus and get behind Trump and make sure that he wins and changes things.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Rod, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your insights. And yes, we absolutely need to win this election. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Danielle. My best to your father and mother.
Well, that wraps up today's show. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to find me on social media. I'm Danielle D'Souza Gill. I'm on X, Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, all the places. So make sure to follow me on there at Danielle D'Souza Gill. And I hope you all have a great day. I'll see you next time, and MAGA.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.